Today on the Stereo Image, I'm talking to one of my best friends and just one of the giants in music writing. And he's a Grammy-winning writer and a radio host for years in Chicago and still to this day. Neil Tesser is probably one of the foremost authorities on jazz in the country. And it's a long story, so I'll make it as short as possible. Neil's really the reason I work for Penn and Teller. I had met Neil on one of the floating jazz festival cruises that I performed on back in probably 1999 or 2000. We hit it off right away. We both had the same kind of happy-go-lucky attitude toward life. We had a lot of fun. Jen, our esteemed producer, is laughing at that. Neil and I, we got along incredibly well. We became fast friends, and he said, well, you should play Chicago at this place called the Green Mill. And he set that up for me. And you'll hear a lot more about that in this episode. But he really is my go-to. I've got a few guys in my life that when I have any questions about a performance or a musician I haven't heard of, he's on top of everything. He knows everyone and everything, and he's a really, really great guy and a really fun guy to talk with. So I was interested in what he grew up listening to and how he got into music, because a guy his age, he's a little older than me, sort of to come up, not be a part of the whole 60s revolution, but commit to studying jazz is an interesting story. So we'll hear what he has to say this week on the Stereo Image. All right. Thanks so much, Neil, for coming in today and coming into the virtual studio. And I just wanted to, welcome you and say thank you for doing this. And
don't thank me yet.
Well, that's true. It could be, it's early. When we came up with this idea, you were one of the first people I thought of, because obviously your vast experience in radio and your incredible knowledge of jazz and all music that you've listened to over the years. So let's go way, way back to when you were just a child in New York, and what was on the radio then? What were you doing? How did you claw your way out of poverty? Those kind of things.
We weren't poor.
Oh, good.
We weren't rich, but my dad made a good living, took care of things. But for whatever reason, we did not have an actual stereo system in the house until I was probably sophomore, junior in high school, maybe. We had an old Victrola, and my connection to listening to things on the old record player, a portable record player, kind of dates back to when I had a really severe case of the measles and was stuck in bed. And, really severe, high fever. This was in the days when pediatricians made house calls, and I had a beloved family doctor. All I remember from that period specifically is him coming over and then standing at the bedroom door after examining me and saying, in what I guess he thought was sotto voce, saying, well, this boy's had his polio vaccine, hasn't he? At which one I went, whoa, what are we talking about here? But with measles, you're not supposed to use your eyes. So they trucked in the phonograph and a bunch of old 78s. And I heard weird stuff from the 40s, including some comedy albums that, unfortunately, I've never been able to completely wipe from my memory.
Well,
terrible stuff.
How old were you? What age did
when
you
I had the measles? Probably 10, 11.
Okay. All right. So pretty early.
But then I for whatever reason, I did have an interest in music and wanted to play an instrument. And when we got to what we call junior high school out on the East Coast, it would be around 7th grade, I said, I want to take up the trumpet, which I did. And then at the advice of everyone, including my family, I put down the trumpet and went back to the band director the next year and said, well, I can't do it. He says, well, you really had the embouchure for a clarinet. I thought, oh, well, it'd be nice to know that a year ago, but sure, I'll give that a try. And I became a pretty good clarinetist, actually. I was in the all-county band on Long Island and first chair in our high school band, and I could play. But around that time, then, as I became more involved with organized concert band music, I was listening like everybody else to the radio. I remember the day Nat King Cole died and heard about it on the radio. I remember when I was driving to my speed reading classes in 1969, listening to Blood, Sweat, and Tears on the radio. And of course, like everybody my age, I was into all of that music. Did go to see Cream at Madison Square Garden on the night that Ginger Baker was supposed to die on stage. That was the rumor. He did not die. It was really the rumor, though.
Wow.
But what was really instrumental was we had a good friend, a friend of the family. We called him Uncle, but he wasn't. He was a family friend who was just this wonderful polyglot, self-taught aesthete. He was an architect, but he taught himself painting, and he painted in a pointillist style that was really terrific. And as a hardcore listener, he had developed a relationship with one of the salesmen at Sam Goody's, which was a big record store chain on the East Coast. And he said, well, when he knew I was getting into music, he said, well, give my friend your name and tell him you know me, and he'll give you a discount. So every few months, I would go into Sam Goody's and pick up a rock album, a classical album, a jazz album, trying to build sort of a general sense of what music was. And he did give me good discounts. And somehow, by great good fortune, the first 3 jazz albums I bought were Duke Ellington's Far East Suite, which is, maybe his greatest suite. Which I've had a chance to write about at various times, and it's just really important to me. Also, Standard Coltrane. This was from his Prestige days with a version of, I think Stardust was on there, but certainly I'll Get By at an up tempo that I always remembered, and Miles Smiles. So pretty good starting.
Yeah. Although, I mean, from a personally, I think, maybe he should have started you a little earlier in the Miles, but,
Miles Smiles had just come out. It was like the mid-'60s, and he said, well, here's the latest Miles Davis, and I certainly didn't have any trouble appreciating it, although I wouldn't have been able to tell you why. But that music was so communicative, whether or not you knew the theory behind it. It was great. And so he probably could have started me on other things, or maybe I just knew the name and said, well, let's try this one. But all through high school, I was listening to all these things. And then I got to college and was doing a classical music radio show. I wanted to go into broadcasting. Did a classical music show based entirely or largely on wind ensemble music, because I had been a member of the wind ensemble at our high school. This is for those who don't know, there's a very specified kind of concert band in which the clarinets are sort of like the violins, and music is written for a non-string ensemble. And usually about 38, 40 pieces. And I went back my sophomore year, and the program director, who was a friend of mine, said, oh, well, we've given away the classical music slot. I said, well, that's what I was planning to do. What should I? He said, well, we have an hour of doing jazz on Friday night. I said, I really don't know that much about jazz. He said, well, there's the record library. So I started listening. I used an assumed name. I used an anagram of my full name, because with the great clarity of your own importance that is endemic to college students, I thought, I don't want our listeners on this, 50-watt station who hear me messing up on jazz to connect me with the classical music expert that I'll go back to being later.
Exactly.
But within a couple of months, I was hooked.
But wait, what was the name? What was your anagram name?
My middle name is Andrew, and you could anagram the whole thing into Lee Weiner Dartness, Dartness. And there are still people from college who go, Lee Dartness, or Prince of Darkness, or whatever.
Nice. You just could have stuck with that.
The really great thing was that it was a completely made up name. But a few years after that, some friends of mine were at one of the big banquet halls in the suburbs for somebody's wedding, and they have the sign on the front telling you what else is going on and what room things are in. And there was a sign for the Dartness bar mitzvah. And we didn't know it was a real name.
No, we thought you would be Beacon Hill Darkness, the Back Bay Darknesses. Well, that's great. I did not know that about you. So you're there at the college radio station, not really knowing what you're doing, and you've got all these jazz records. Where did you start with what you were playing? I mean,
I knew Miles Davis because I had that record. I knew Duke Ellington. I knew John Coltrane, and
I like that you knew of them.
I knew of them, right?
You
right.
knew, yeah, you knew them from one record of a 200 record.
I knew their names.
Yes, exactly.
But like, I think everybody, at least at that time, to some extent, maybe it still goes this way. You listen to the Miles Davis quintet and you go, wow, this guy, Herbie Hancock, he's pretty interesting. What else has he done? And then you start buying records, you start looking into the sidemen, you start reading. And in a little while, I was getting pretty hooked.
So you got out of college in the early 70s?
Yeah, 1973, I graduated.
And yeah, okay. And so, but we're missing a step here too. So you decided to go to Northwestern.
Right.
And that took you to Chicago, which
exactly
opened up a whole new world of, I would assume, of going to clubs and listening and hearing.
Well, mostly it opened up during college a whole new world of attractive women who did not have New York accents, which I really wanted to get away from.
But yeah. Well, I can understand that because accents are different everywhere. But now let me ask you this: you went to school. What happened at graduation? What kept you in? Did you decide you wanted to stay in Chicago for the lifestyle, or did you immediately get some gig that let you stay?
Well, so here was the thing. I had started writing an occasional jazz review or interview for the Northwestern paper, and then for a new publication that had just started, free weekly called the Chicago Reader.
Oh, okay.
I then wrote for the next, on and off, well, mostly on for the next 30 years, 25, 30 years.
At least, yeah.
And with that in mind, I thought, well, I've got some things going on here, but probably the bigger draw. Well, there were a couple of things. One, New York City in 1973 was a mess. I mean, if you didn't read the headlines, if you didn't see the 82-point type on the New York Daily News saying Ford the city dropped dead,
right,
he was going broke. Then all you had to do was talk to my dad, who'd grown up in New York, and of course, like most people who remember the good old days, was full of stories about how things used to be better. I had a kind of negative impression of New York at the time. It was a bad time to think about going there. And so I figured I'd stay in Chicago for a while, for a few years, and eventually move back to New York. As I got more established in Chicago, my timeline, my projection, I'll go back to New York in 3 years, became 6 years, became 9 years, then I was here. But the thing that helped a lot was my last quarter. Northwestern's on the quarter system. So the last marking period of my time at Northwestern, I organized a student-organized seminar on jazz history, because there was nothing in jazz in the music department, which I had taken 2 years of theory in because I was interested. So I knew there were jazz people.
What? Were you still playing clarinet?
I pretty much put it down, but I just wanted to be able to know more about music. And in that class that I got to organize, I used the books that I had read, Marshall Stern's early, really good volume on early history and a few others. And I inveigled the publisher of Downbeat at the time, which is based in Chicago, a man named Chuck Suber, who was known for his sponsorship and championship of jazz education. I got him to come in and talk to the first meeting of the class.
Wow.
And through that, he knew me. He threw something into his column, an issue or two later, about this guy at Northwestern starting a jazz history class. And then he funneled some record reviews my way, not for publication, but he wanted opinions on some albums that were coming in from Japan. So he got to know me. And the following fall, they hired me as associate editor, which said a lot more about where Downbeat was at that time than it did about my abilities. I mean, the magazine was next.
Yeah, but I mean, clearly they recognized that you had something. You know,
it was a pretty dysfunctional organization at that time, and the fact that the publisher could simply say, "Well, I know this guy just out of college, and we need somebody who can copy edit better than our editor, who was functionally illiterate and certainly couldn't spell, but had been put there because he looked the part. So anyway, I got in there. I lasted less than a year because the place was such a rat's nest. And that's 12 other stories that we'll tell some other time.
Okay.
But at that point, I was here. I was writing for this paper, The Reader. I had started writing for the Chicago Sun-Times. I was doing a radio show that we were supposed to be selling ads for. I never did. And that lasted about 2.5 years. But at that point, I was starting to establish myself. So that was why I decided to stay in Chicago.
Right. Wow. And so going back to that time,
I went to everything I could find.
Yeah. It sounds good, but it's not. I mean, you were out seeing music every night.
Maybe not every night, but many nights, and usually 2 or 3 things in a night if I could. The year before my senior year, I had stayed in Chicago for the summer, and I still can't believe I did this. But when Joe Siegel, the famous entrepreneur of the famous Jazz Showcase, it's been a peripatetic club. It's been in one place now for a while, but it used to do his concerts at different places, and he was putting on his shows one summer at I think it was the second floor of a blues club, and I came to him and said, well, look, I play music from your artists on my college radio show. I think you should let me in for free. I can't believe I did it. No one can believe that he said, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
But from there, I had carte blanche at the Jazz Showcase. And most of the other places didn't even charge a cover for a lot of the local bands. I had also made the acquaintance of the woman who was doing publicity. This was while I was still in college, for Mr. Kelly's and the London House, 2 fabled jazz supper clubs that are long gone. And so she would always put me on the guest list there. So I didn't have a trouble getting into places to go. And so I made the most of it. I went to as much as I could and met as many people as I could and heard as much as I could live.
Well, I don't know why. I don't know the history of those clubs as well as I should, but I didn't know that the London House was still operating in the 70s.
Oh yeah, it was still going into probably the mid to late 70s.
Oh, okay, all right. And now it's a corner bakery.
It was a corner bakery. It's been taken over by a hotel that's now called the London House Hotel, and they do have a rooftop restaurant with music, but it's not the London House where Oscar Peterson and Stan Getz and Kenny.
No, I remember. Well, one of the first times I was in Boston, you took me by there. I was actually staying in the hotel next door.
When you were in Chicago.
Yeah. Did I say Boston? I meant Chicago. Because you weren't in Boston. So yeah, we went there and you said, there's where the London House used to be. And it was a corner bakery.
At the time, it was a corner bakery then.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good sandwiches. But I talked to Eddie Higgins about his time at the London House, and the stories he had were just too many to go into. But
yeah,
I mean,
one thing they did at the London House, which was great, and I think Eddie did this. Certainly, a friend of mine and whose music you may know, named Larry Novak, who was one of Oscar Peterson's favorite piano players, as it turned out. But they would have an intermission pianist, so the main artist would play, and then when they took a break, a piano trio would play while people were having dinner, and so there was a lot of music going on.
Right. Well, and actually, on one of when they put out the box set of the Oscar London House, all those records, you can hear Oscar saying, "And we'll leave you in the very capable hands of Mr. Eddie Higgins." Yeah. And it's really nice. So to continue our epic tale of, so you were with Downbeat, but then you left because it was just a nut house.
That's pretty much true. I was fired in the process of quitting, or I quit in the process of being fired. I'm not sure. Yeah.
So when did you get on your big radio show that went forever?
On National Public Radio. Yeah. 1979, I think it was, toward the end of the year. the station got a public radio station here, which was fledgling and in many ways amateur hour stuff. But they did have jazz at night. And one of the guys who had been doing the jazz program was also the program director, who they fired for other reasons. And then there was a slot open. And a few people around town who they spoke to remembered the show that I had done that we never sold advertising for several years earlier and recommended me. And so they hired me. And I stayed there for about 16 years until things started to change in ways that I didn't really enjoy it continuing with. And within, I guess, 5 years, maybe later, they had gotten rid of jazz altogether, as many public radio stations have done since.
Yeah. I
Not because I wasn't there. I mean,
well, no, I would say absolutely, because
no, it was just going.
No, but I mean, no, but
Trends were changing.
I know, but part of the joy of listening to jazz on a public radio station, like I luckily, in Boston we had GBH and
Eric.
WBR, and I listened for Jimmy Isaacs, who was a great voice, a really knowledgeable guy.
I did not know James Isaacs did radio. I only knew him from writing and from liner notes, and he always was somebody I thought, oh, this guy's good.
He had a great show, and he did that thing that I loved. Being a Red Garland fan, was when he would come on to talk and give the weekly, who's playing where and everything. He would always have some Red Garland playing.
Oh,
he was very hip and just great. And I think he was on 5 nights a week.
Nah. Well, I was on 4 nights a week, often late, like from 10 at night to 1 in the morning. And I won't claim to be hip, but I will claim to have put a lot of music on that wasn't being played elsewhere, including a lot of avant-garde, AACM stuff. People would complain, but other people, in fact, today, every so often at one of the clubs here that has more experimental music, I run into a guy who, after all these years, and tells me every time, I really got to thank you for turning me on to all of the stuff that I'm listening to now that brought me to this club, because nobody else was putting it on the air.
No. And I mean, James Isaacs, he was more toward the mainstream, but it's where I first we're talking early 80s. It's probably where I first heard about Lee Morgan and people like that, that a white kid from South Buffalo wasn't necessarily hip to the whole Blue Note scene.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew the big names. I knew the Verve stuff because I grew up with my dad playing, Oscar and things like that. But I had never heard of the Art Ensemble or anybody like that till I got to Berkeley. And then all of a sudden, all of those doors opened up and it was great. But there was another guy in Boston, Tony Chinamo, who was like, he was probably like maybe 9 to 1 and James Isaacs was after him or something. Mm-hmm. It was a weird thing, but he was kind of jivey, Mm-hmm. I think he thought he was the reincarnation of Symphony Sid or something.
Every city had those. We had a couple.
We got a fresh one off the wax here. It's 2000. There's no more wax,
Since you mentioned those guys, I should say that when I, growing up on Long Island, WRVR, the jazz station in New York, was still a jazz station. And a guy named Ed Beach, who you may have heard of, was on every night. And he would do, 2 hours on one artist and had this incredibly deep voice, very resonant, something I never could claim. And then also when I was in college, we were able to get, because it was a clear channel station, which meant that at night it could travel many, many states. I could listen to a guy named Harry Abraham, who was based on the East Coast and did a late night show out of Rochester, New York, and WHAM. And I would call him from Northwestern. I would call him during his slot on a Sunday night, and he would talk to me in between records. And I thought that was incredibly cool. And it was great to, hear from somebody and give me a sense of what you could do if you wanted to do that on the air professionally. I didn't know that before that he had been a pimp and a ski instructor, but I wasn't really willing to go that route. But with the radio part, I could connect with.
Right. Well, the ski instructor is still ahead of you. But I'm from
So you
Buffalo,
knew him.
so I
knew his
certainly knew
the show.
name. Yeah, I knew his show, and I never met him. But when did you start getting?
In the
record
Reader.
reviews
I mean,
published?
shortly after I graduated, I became basically the jazz critic for the Chicago Reader. It was never that formalized. Anybody could write for the Reader. I was covering jazz on a regular basis, often, if not every week, pretty close to it. And then they started having little write-ups saying, here's who's coming to town, here's why you should see them. I did a lot of those. I was also doing a media column for about 6-7 years there. So the Reader was kind of my gig, but also doing the radio at NPR. And I was reviewing things for the Chicago Sun-Times.
Right. So you're working hard. I mean, I remember one of the first times I was out in Chicago. Maybe it was 99 or 2000 or 2001. I don't know. But just keeping up with you on where we were going to see who we were going to see that night. We made like 4 stops, and it was amazing. That was probably 2000.
That's I only met you in 99, so it's probably about right.
Yeah, but it was I got to go down and see these people, and I got to go to this place, and I got to go, and it was great.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, but I mean, again, I'm literally in a desert out here now, so there's not a lot of chances to see live jazz. There's I'm meeting a few good players after 25 years of being out here, because there's sort of no call for them.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of.
Well, back in the old days, there were great jazz players playing there in the clubs. And
there were. Yeah. And there were great jazz players that lived here. I mean, a lot of guys from road bands wound up, taking a gig at a casino here in the pit band and having a nice life.
Yeah.
And then I don't know the entire story because it was long before I got here, but back in the 80s, there was a ill-fated musician strike, which one casino wanted to use recorded music for one of their shows. And all the musicians went on strike and walked out, and they just fired them off and said, we'll just use recorded music for every show. Talked to a guy who had played 4 nights with Sinatra at Caesars, and then he'd go over and do Sammy because he was at the Sands, and then it's just like, they worked constantly. There was plenty of work, and then it all overnight went away.
Yeah.
So by the time I got here in '99, there was not any scene, and the guys that were in those bands in the 60s and 70s had mostly either stopped playing or moved or died. And, so there wasn't anybody to see here that was still left over that could tell me about the glory days. Mm-hmm. But now I'm there's 2 clubs that have opened in the last 3 years here, and both of them are very energetic and have this Maxon has developed a little bit of a scene around it. Nice. And Vix has money behind it and is a gorgeous club, and it's got they're bringing in, it's basically a club where they bring in just people they like to play.
Oh, good.
And it's amazing because there's no cover. It's just a restaurant, but it's an 88 seated room that's set up by some architect from New York that just did a beautiful job on this room. And so there are people there that are not really big names. They're not the people that would play the Smith Center, but they're, again, Jeff Hamilton's played there a few times. There's some good names there. But what killed me was, in a strange programming idea, they brought in George Garzone.
For those who don't know, you should tell.
Yeah, well, for those who don't know, George Garzone is a very, very cutting edge avant-garde type of player at times. Not what you would consider dinner music.
No.
By anyone's stretch. Yet they brought him in, and he did well.
That's fun.
But I just thought to myself, could you imagine like trying to eat a plate of shrimps?
Now.
I mean, I used to see George fairly often at the Willow in Boston, and
It's not background music. That's, I think, all we have to really say.
And as I often, my standard go-to joke was after a night of like being reduced to a massive sweat and intense emotional things, I'd walk out of the club and say, well, I'll be humming that all night. Because there's guttural screams and, it's just great, but not what I would consider, music for an Italian restaurant.
But
they're great. It's great,
Gardone. So you could see the
exactly. It's an ethnic, but it's a good club, and it's really fun to be able to go see some people. Larry Fuller has played there a few times. It's not a club that's big enough to have like a Monty Alexander,
right?
But it's really well done, and no cover. And the food is excellent.
Great.
And so now I've given a 20-minute pitch on.
If I ever come to Vegas again, you can take me there.
Well, I hope you do.
That's not going to happen.
I know. It's not my scene, but it's what it is. How did you sort of get to appreciate? Was it just opening your ears to where or being in Chicago, or what got you to start to expand your horizons into the more avant-garde things that you?
Oh yeah, I was in Chicago. It was the home of the Association for the Advancement of Creative Musicians. Mm-hmm. This is 1974. The organization's only been around less than a decade. Mm-hmm. The Art Ensemble of Chicago has Chicago right in its name.
It does.
And I thought, well, this stuff is all happening here. And some people I respect really are very high on it. I need to figure out what it's about. So I consciously taught myself to listen for what I might have been missing and to appreciate what was going on in that music. I felt it was kind of a civic responsibility if I was going to be writing about music here in town, which was a nexus for this kind of music. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I paid attention.
Wow. Yeah. Well, it's clear that you have a deep understanding of many different kinds of music. But a lot of people just they close themselves off to those things, and and I mean, people get pigeonholed all the time, But Sun Ra, who was a great stride player, great stride pianist, and
wrote great arrangements of swing era classics, as he had done for Fletcher Henderson. Right. When he started,
right,
and was still playing them up until the last years of his life.
Well,
I mean, he could go in all these directions. Well, Sun Ra was not part of the AACM, but he was a precursor. A lot of the musicians who formed the AACM were certainly familiar with Sun Ra and used him as a part of one of the examples for what they wanted to do. But their motto was from the ancient to the future. So their idea was we're taking in the whole scope of things,
right,
and if you only heard the Art Ensemble and heard Lester Bowie squawking around and never paid attention to him playing a ballad,
right,
or with his group Brass Fantasy, which was like a jazz funk, I mean, you just had to listen and go, that's great. But the other thing that I always found is that people who had very little knowledge of jazz or music in general were often more open to this music because they didn't have to unlearn what they thought was good and bad.
Right.
They would just respond to the energy.
Didn't have their preconceptions. And I saw Sun's band 10 years ago in New York, and they were still doing that. It's this amazing conglomeration, and all of a sudden they're into this tight Fletcher Henderson thing for 10 bars at a double time, and then it breaks up into and it's just, you laugh. I mean, it's so tight. And speaking, of course, we Marshall Allen putting out a new album at 100.
Yeah.
And still playing great. I mean,
he really, it's unbelievable to me that he can sustain the stamina to do what he does. Because that's hard playing. He's playing what we call, extended technique. It's extreme stuff. It's notes that are not on the saxophone,
right.
that many modern players have learned to do. That takes a lot out of you.
Right. And the fact that he's still doing it well at 100,
right.
gives me hope.
Right.
But because at least I don't have to breathe for my instrument. I mean, that's what kills me is his lung power must be supernatural, to still be doing it. But
yeah.
And I saw a little promo video of this new song he did with Don Cherry's daughter.
Oh yeah.
And
Nina Cherry.
and he's just walking up the stairs like nothing. He's not even grabbing the handrail. I can barely get up the stairs myself.
The doctors won't let him fly anymore because of blood pressure. So he's restricted to playing places that they can travel by train.
Oh,
but so he won't be coming back out to Chicago anymore. He wasn't out here the last time the orchestra was here, and that's the reason why. Even though he's doing pretty well, they just don't want to take a chance.
Well,
I get it.
Yeah, I mean, because he's probably got gigs booked for the next 10 years. But oh Jesus! Well,
and most of them are on this planet.
Yeah, I think we covered everything about your history and your genius. I'm
going to throw two other things in there. One is that most of the writing I do now is for liner notes,
right,
for albums, which is, of course, how I got your gig with Penn and Teller.
Right.
But
we were going to talk about that a little bit.
So I've written over 610 sets of liner notes, and I still work on them.
For which you're a Grammy winner. Let's not.
Yes, I did get a Grammy. Yeah,
Grammy author.
Me and John Coltrane shared that one.
Yep.
And so I like that form. I find it interesting. There's so few publications anymore that allow you to really write, unless you're just doing it for yourself on Substack or
right.
So I like doing that. And then for the last, I guess coming up on 3 years, I've been doing a program from Chicago on a station in San Diego. Mm-hmm. There's a station, KSDS, which is kind of the main jazz station in Southern California. Mm-hmm. And they started a program slot called Jazz Across America, where each night they have a program from a different city, hosted by somebody from that city.
Right.
So I do the one from Chicago. Kermit Ruffins does the one from New Orleans.
Okay.
And on Monday night, Kenny Washington, the drummer, who used to do a radio program at WBGO before they got too weird, right. He does a program from New York that's on that station. So it's kind of an interesting lineup.
Yeah. Well, I obviously I know you're doing that because we're good friends.
And because I occasionally play your albums.
Oh, well, the royalties keep rolling in. I can't really account for them all. But before we get to the lovely story of our meeting, which I'm sure will enthrall the audience, all four of them, this is a loaded question, and it might be too much of a question. It would take up so much time. But in general, what are you listening to these days that's not? I think I want to ask, what are you listening to that's not part of your job? You know what I mean? Your job is to listen to music and analyze it and write liner notes. And what are you listening to for your own enjoyment?
I mostly, a lot of recordings come out each year. I keep track of them. Last year was close to 600, and I don't get everything.
Right.
There's many more than that. So I feel almost guilty if I'm going to listen to anything, if I'm not listening to one of the piles of records around my office that have not actually been heard. I like to at least be aware of what's going on with them. And not just physical CDs. A lot of people just send downloads of files, and I'm happy to have that. I have a 2 or 3 terabyte drive that's only a little more than half filled with all these albums that have come out.
Right.
So mostly, I guess I'm trying. And you say for my job, I'm not writing about everything. I'm not reviewing a lot of music at all, but I am listening to things to put on the radio. And also because I want to have a general sense of what people are doing so that I can see things that I might want to program, how they fit into what's going on.
Okay.
So that's part of that. I listen to people that I know and respect and like. I want to see what they're up to. There's 20 or 30 that the moment they release a new album, I at least earmark it and put it aside and try to get to it fairly soon, because I know from experience that it's likely to be something pretty darn interesting. There's also, I just want to sometimes listen to things that I don't expect to be very different from somebody, but because they're also good, I know I want to know they're still doing what they do at the same level they do it.
Right.
In terms of listening to stuff that's not at all connected with what I do, not a lot. I'll run across something that somebody will send me. I'll pay passing attention to some of the stuff in pop music. Jazz and new classical music are sort of, there's a space. I love the term that's out of fashion now, but liminal space, the liminal space between jazz and classical music, where they cross like a Venn diagram. So you could probably call that classical music. You wouldn't necessarily call it jazz. So I do like that. I like music from different ethnic sensibilities, Japanese music, not necessarily pop music, African music. Certainly I'm a big fan of Brazilian music in general. But that's kind of it. I don't spend a lot of time trying to seek out the latest rap sensation or hip hop thing, not because I don't think it deserves attention. It's not something that speaks to me.
Right. And also I found that as I'm getting older, I don't need to hear the newest, best guy. I just want to hear something that makes me happy.
Yeah.
And if it's Sonny Rollins with the Poll Winners, which I know is going to make me feel great. I'll put it on, But
see, I don't do that much of that, unfortunately, and I know a number of people who do what I do who are kind of in the same boat. Because again, we have a sense of responsibility to hear what somebody sent us or what somebody put out. And again, we're talking about 600 albums last year. So
that's insane.
Yeah.
Nobody can listen to that.
No, but it does make you feel a little leery of saying, I think I'll go back and listen to Kind of Blue again.
Right. Yeah, no, I understand. That's what I mean. You have a different position than almost, I talk to musicians all the time, and we've all got our favorite stuff, but none of us are doing what you're doing, which is why I wanted to talk to you, because it's a responsibility, and it's a lot of work. I don't know if people understand that. I think people think at some level you listen to something, you come up with a few thoughts and you jot them down, and then lo and behold, there's their liner notes,
Yeah.
And it's clearly not any of that. it's clear.
No, I like to talk to the artist, find out what they're thinking, what went into the creation of this particular album. Right. And just to be clear, if I do go back and listen to Kind of Blue, it's always great, and I always hear something different.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's that. Yeah, that's so. Is there one question I've been asking everybody, which is almost irrelevant in your case, but is there something that you listen to and enjoy that we wouldn't expect? That people wouldn't. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, people who especially would hear some of the more modernistic things that I would put on the radio would be surprised that I was a big, fan of Louis Armstrong. Mm-hmm. But to me, Louis Armstrong is still avant-garde.
Oh, yeah.
So it's an easy choice. I don't know. I've always tried to cultivate a pretty expansive listening menu within jazz.
Right.
I know people who are listening to who are very good writers on jazz and new music, who are listening to all kinds of experimental pop, experimental classical, straight ahead rock, things that I just don't get to.
Right.
And I have even more respect for them because they managed to incorporate that and interpret it and absorb it all. But I don't know that there's anything terribly surprising.
Well, no, it doesn't have to be. And with you, it would be almost not impossible but your whole world is listening. And as I say, you know, I mean, when I use this example fairly often, but when people find out that I like some P-Funk and some Wild Cherry, Play That Funky Music, White Boy.
Yeah.
Some of that real hard, you know, Rufus and Shaka Khan, that kind of real driving. They don't see that with me, but so it's kind of it's kind of a surprise. But I mean, I grew up listening to Led Zeppelin and Cream and all that stuff too. But
I'm still a vintage rock fan, you know. But we're talking about stuff that you hear when you're growing up, that always remains locked in there.
It's true.
Yeah. And there's some theories that people really stop listening to anything new after like they're 40. They just only want to. It's the success of all the oldies stations. And,
right. Yeah, I try to listen. I mean, I admit to not turning on the Sirius Top 10 channel very often, you know, but occasionally I'll go by it just to say, oh, what am I missing? And
yeah,
for me, it's, you know, usually not. It doesn't. None of it speaks to me. I mean, especially with the lack of live musicians on tracks anymore, you know, the fact that they call them tracks, and the fact that, you know, it's just, it's sort of all, I'm, as my friend John Keel once said to me when I was bemoaning the stack of keyboards that everyone plays and the sampling and all that stuff, he said, you know, Mike, you're playing the sack butt. You're just playing an instrument that's going to go away.
Not since you lost all that weight.
Sack butt. That was my name in high school.
I am a big fan of Klingon opera, however.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, there's not enough of it. But
rarely heard sentence.
Yes. Penn was in they're in Australia, and they just went and saw the Siegfried and Roy opera.
Oh my God! Is there such a thing?
Yeah, it premiered at the Sydney Opera House.
Wow!
And he said he wasn't crazy about it, but Teller liked it. So,
wow!
But
so, is the Tiger a tenor or a contralto?
Yes. Well, the Tiger can't sense high blood pressure. You know that story, right? That was the story they were telling. That the Tiger did not attack Roy. The Tiger sensed that Roy had high blood pressure, so he ripped his throat out to relieve the blood pressure.
Yeah. Well,
stable.
Tigers do make the best diagnosticians.
I think so. But I mean, there's a level of sadness and crazy there that I don't. Although I will say it, I think I can say this without any fear of getting in trouble. One of the greatest things Siegfried ever said was, "I am not straight. I am not gay. I am Siegfried." So, but they're both gone now.
Yeah, well, no more of that talk in this administration.
That's right. That's right. Listen, we went out and visited. I went out to the there's still a couple of their tigers out at and lions at the lion habitat out here. And I went to say congratulations on your victory. Shall we delve real quickly into our disclaimer of knowing each other, or do we need to even bother?
So in 1999, I got on a jazz cruise that I was going to be covering for Jazz Times magazine.
Yes.
And was that the first cruise you had been on?
It was.
So Mike Jones and his brother are on that cruise. And the first night, even though I had said I would like to eat at the later dinner seating because I like to eat later, nonetheless, they made a mistake and I was given a 5:00 mealtime.
Mm.
And I get to the table and there's the publisher of Jazz Times magazine and his wife, charming woman, And stop that.
She is. She was.
And Mike Jones and his brother and a few other people. And during that dinner, I'd never met Mike Jones. I didn't know who you were. I didn't know what you did. It's still kind of a mystery.
Yes, completely.
But there were a lot of complaining from the woman that we mentioned a moment ago. She had complaints about the cruise line because the Jazz Cruise had previously been on other lines, and she was a little naggy, I think I would have to say. And when we were, and also I loved about that when the publisher of Jazz Times said, "So who are you covering this for?" I said, "For you."
yeah, exactly.
He didn't have a day-to-day hands-on connection.
Yes,
Ira. So we're at dinner. We're having a good time. Mike is eating furiously because he has so much energy that if he's not at the piano, he doesn't know what to do. And he's drinking Diet Coke after Diet Coke after Diet Coke, as he is right now during this interview, because that is his, but not just his drink of choice, it's his drink of necessity. And when we get done, Mike and his brother and I get up from the table, and I walk away and I said, well, I'm going to be switching to the later dinner option because, quite frankly, there's not enough Prozac in the world to get me through 10 days sitting at that table with that woman. And Mike said, "Oh, yeah, well, we're going to go too. We like you." So we all switched our dinner reservation, which turned out to be really great because they ended up putting us a table with a couple of older women. I mean, they were probably in their 70s then. This is 99, so I would have been almost 50. You would have been almost 40, I guess.
Yeah.
And we ate with them, and afterwards they said, "Oh, well, you guys are very nice. And I'm sure you'll find your own table." We said, "No, we're eating with you every night." They were so much fun. They were just great gals. Darlene, who was on the cruise to teach bridge. And, the difference hadn't been so great, I probably would have dated her. She was just such a wonderful woman. She was just great. And anyway, so then I go to hear Mike play on the Jazz Cruise. You were playing, as I recall, like a late set every night, right?
Two. There was only two or three times, but yes.
Oh, okay. Well, the first one I went to see you, it was pretty late. Mm-hmm. And I was amazed at what you played. I was amazed at the sense of humor that you used to defuse some one or two bizarre audience members. And you finished up, and then we went to, I went to have a drink with your brother, and you went to have some more Diet Coke with us. And we stayed up telling jokes till like 2 a.m. And we did that every night without realizing that every night, since we were sailing across the Atlantic, it was getting an hour later.
Yeah.
So after several nights of this, we were going to bed at the equivalent of 4 or 5 in the morning. Yeah. So I stopped that. And then I, wrote something up about you. And we got you to come to Chicago to play at the Green Mill, where you play every year and have recorded one album. And at some point within the next year or two, I got an assignment for Verve Records to write about liner notes for an Oscar Peterson record. It's on the Town, right?
Yeah, which is funny because it seems like I knew you forever when you called me about that.
It could only have been a couple of years. It
had been a few years. It must have been like 2000. Well, because it led to everything. So it had to be like 2000 because
it was within a year or two. And anyway, the thing about Oscar Peterson is, as amazing as it was and as amazing as music remains to be, the general critics' knock on him was, it's always the same. You could come into the middle of an Oscar Peterson solo and you wouldn't know what tune it was, or it wouldn't matter because he's doing all the stuff that's not really related to the tune. And I kind of felt that way too. But I also thought that there's something to the fact that if he's not telling a story the way we want jazz musicians to tell a narrative in their solos, maybe the story is this abundance of technique, which itself becomes the story, where the medium is the message at that point. And I thought, well, who could speak to that? I know one guy who plays not too many notches below and maybe at an even keel with Oscar Peterson. I'll call my friend Mike Jones. So I did.
Mhm.
You gave me some excellent insights. I put them in the liner notes. Album comes out. By now you're living in Las Vegas. Hand to mouth, it sounded like, from the way you described it.
It wasn't well. It wasn't good.
Yeah, you weren't doing good. And you're a magician named Mike Close, who is, you can tell the rest of this part of the story.
Well, I mean, that I have no qualms about anything you've said, except that I was, you thought of me in the same breath as Oscar Peterson. But
Oscar Peterson was obviously your inspiration,
Right,
and you had met him, and you had his smile.
But thank you. But you, when you called and we talked about it, I said one of the things that no one talks about is his incredible arrangements and how tight that group was and how they rehearsed to death. And so we talked a lot about that. And then I hang up and I think, oh, good, maybe he'll get something out of that. And then flash forward, however many months while they manufactured the CDs and then they came out, I get a call from Mike Close. And I don't.
Now, did you know who he was?
I never heard of him. I get a call. And basically, it was a call. If in this day and age, if the call came through on my cell phone, I wouldn't have answered because it would have said a number that I didn't recognize. But it was the old landline days, and the phone rang. And desperate for work, I picked it up. And he said this was probably in March of 2001. He said, "My name's Mike Close. I'm a magician and a piano player in town here. And I just bought this Oscar Peterson CD and it's all about you. And I want to hear you play." And
because I had mentioned that you were living in Vegas.
Yeah.
He's just thumbing through the racks and he sees this. And I said, "Oh, this guy lives in Vegas."
I said, I'm playing the worst gig of my life. I said, if you want to come to this place and pay an exorbitant amount of money for people that just won money on a slot machine and wanted to go to a fancy dinner, come on up and see me. This is a horrible gig. And he said, well, we're coming tonight. And I said, oh, okay. And promptly forgot about it. And that evening, this guy walks in and he's got this other guy that I've seen before with him. And it's Penn Jillette of Penn and Teller. And I had met Penn very briefly, like in a recording studio in New York, but being in New York for the late 80s and 90s, I certainly knew who he was. He was on Howard Stern every day, and they were always on Letterman, and they were always on Saturday Night Live. So he was, I knew who he was. He was a loudmouth guy that was a magician, and, but I didn't know their show. I didn't know anything he did. I didn't know anything about him. But he very nicely came up to the piano and he bought all of my CDs, which gave me enough money to put gas in the car that week. And I was very happy. And they came over and they invited me over to sit with them after I got done with my set. And just out of politeness, more than anything, I was just trying to be like a human being, which is hard for me. I said, "Hey, I'm recording an album next month. The label is coming in from New York, and they're bringing up this $200,000 instrument from Kauai because I was already a Kauai artist, and as they're bringing up this $200,000 instrument from Compton, which is where all good instruments come from.
Kauai makes a $200,000 piano.
That's Kauai makes many $200,000. You know that they're now 9-foot concert grands. You can't get one for under $240,000.
Holy cow!
But at the time, 20 years ago, it was the state of the art. Fit. And they sent a technician from Japan with the piano. It was in tune for the recording section. It was amazing.
Was he like you had to lift the lid to let him out, or
which I thought was unusual. They got him in there. So anyhow, I just to be polite, I invited them, and they sure enough came to the recording session, and Penn said, I want to hang out with you. And then the next week, I came to Chicago and played the Mill, and that was
the Green Mill, famous jazz club here in
famous
town.
jazz club in Chicago, 60609. I played the gig. I stayed with you. And that was the second.
Because I had told the owner of the Green Mill about you.
This was the second or third time I'd played there.
Right.
Second. But And then what happened was, while I was there on that Sunday, I talked to my dad, and my mom got ill, and she was very ill at the time. And then I lost her the next day, and I was so mad because I flew back to Vegas instead of flying directly from Chicago to Buffalo. Anyhow, that's another sad story. But the fact is, Penn's mom had passed recently too. And he said, I want to get together with you and just, I think I like you. I want to shoot the shit and talk.
I never heard this part.
And I said, well, I thought to myself, well, this is a famous rich guy who's known as a bon vivant. And I can't afford to hang out with this guy. He probably drops a couple of grand in a strip club every night. So I was a little hesitant and I demurred, but I said, well, I'm going to Chicago. And then when we get back, they were doing a road gig, and he said, I'll give you a call. So anyways, he called me up and he said, let's go to lunch. And I thought, oh God, I don't know if I have enough money to offer to pay for my half of lunch. Right. Cause I was serious.
Yeah.
So he says, well, we'll meet at the NASCAR cafe at the Sahara, because there's a magic show in the afternoon there that a couple of my friends are in, and we'll go see the show afterwards. So now I'm thinking, oh my God, do I got to pay for a magic show ticket too? And the NASCAR cafe, the food's going to be awful. And it turned out none of that mattered. We had a wonderful conversation. We were both in tears talking about our mom. And we went to see this magic show, and everything was, he took care of everything. And that's how we developed a friendship. And he said, I have all these musicians coming over to my house every Tuesday night, because he had just started playing upright bass a year before. And he said, I want to play bass and have a jazz jam session every night. And he said, and to entice you, there'll be topless women serving Diet Coke. And I said, well, good, but do they know the bridge to Cherokee? I don't care. It was. So anyway, that's how it all got started. And then that was in May of 2001. And then in December of 2001, he called me from the road and he said, we're going to be at the Rio full time. And we think we want a jazz band. We want you to play in our show. And I want to play with you every night. And again, I've told this story a million times, but I said, what do you want jazz and a magic show for? And he said, I want to play with you every night. And I said, you've been playing the bass for a year. You're going to get up in front of 1,400 people? And he said, well, I'm not going to get any better if I don't play. And that's their whole attitude on everything. So that's 24 years ago now.
Wow.
23 years ago. Last week. And
I'm still waiting for my commission.
Well, every night when I leave my dressing room, I genuflect to the photo of you on my wall in my dressing room. I thank Neil.
I've been in your dressing room. There is no photo.
Oh, well, there will be now. Well, listen, I can't thank you enough for all this. This is a lot of fun, and we learned a lot. I learned that you had a pseudonym that I think it should be the title of your first solo album when you're 100. And Enter the Darkness.
Maybe Lee Darkness plays Marshall Allen.
Yeah. The later years. Anyhow, well, thank you so much, Neil, for doing this. Really, it's been a pleasure.